It was 11:47 p.m. on a freezing Tuesday night in Milwaukee when Rosa Delgado's trembling fingers hovered over her cracked phone screen. The single mother of two had just received an eviction notice, 5 days to pay $800 or watch her children become homeless. Her hands shook not from the cold, but from desperation so raw it felt like drowning. A shaking mother's desperate text was about to change two lives forever. Rosa squinted through the spiderweb crack running across her phone, trying to make out her sister's number. The battery was dying, showing just 3% power, and she had one chance to send this message before losing contact with the outside world. Her 8-year-old daughter Carmen and 5-year-old son Diego were finally asleep in the next room, unaware that their entire world was about to collapse. Have you ever been so desperate you'd text anyone for help? That moment when pride dissolves and survival becomes the only thing that matters. Rosa typed with shaking fingers, "Maria, I don't know what else to do. They're going to evict us next week and I can't let my babies end up homeless. I've tried everything. I work 70 hours a week, but it's never enough. The car breaking down finished us. I'm so scared and tired and I don't know who else to ask. Can you help? Even $500 would give us time to figure something out. I'm sorry to ask again. Rosa." She hit send just as her phone died. But this wasn't just anyone who got her message. What happens when desperation meets a single mistyped digit? When a mother's final plea for help reaches someone who has the power to change everything, not just for her, but for thousands of families just like hers. 60 miles away in a Chicago penthouse, a man was about to read those words. A man whose response would shatter every assumption Rosa had about strangers, about help, and about what's possible when two completely different worlds collide. What she discovered about the stranger who responded will shock you, and the transformation that followed will restore your faith in humanity. If stories of unexpected connections inspire you, hit that like button now, because what you're about to hear proves that sometimes the universe conspires to connect exactly the right people at exactly the right moment. Rosa's alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m., the sound cutting through the darkness of her cramped Milwaukee apartment like a knife. She'd been awake for an hour already, staring at the water stain on her ceiling that looked like a map of nowhere. This was her reality: 2 bedrooms, thin walls, and the constant hum of traffic from the highway that never let her children sleep deeply. She moved quietly through her morning routine, careful not to wake Carmen and Diego. 8-year-old Carmen had her mother's determination, already helping with 5-year-old Diego's breakfast before school. These kids were Rosa's universe, her reason for pushing through 16-hour days that left her bones aching and her spirit stretched to breaking. Rosa worked as a certified nursing assistant at Milwaukee General Care Facility, double shifts, back to back, caring for elderly patients who reminded her daily that life could be beautiful even when your body was failing. She earned her CNA certification while pregnant with Carmen, studying between contractions, determined to build something better for her growing family. The numbers were brutal. At $16 an hour, Rosa brought home roughly $2,400 a month before taxes. Their apartment cost $1,200. Utilities, groceries, and basic necessities consumed the rest. There was no room for error, no cushion for emergencies, no safety net when life decided to kick you while you were down. 3 years ago, Rosa's ex-husband Miguel walked out, leaving behind gambling debts and broken promises. He drained their savings account the night before he disappeared, taking their emergency fund and their hope with him. Since then, Rosa had carried the full weight of parenthood alone, working 70 hours a week just to stay afloat. Her lifeline was Mrs. Patterson, a 73-year-old retired teacher who lived next door. This angel watched Carmen and Diego before school in exchange for Rosa's help with grocery shopping and household repairs. It was the kind of arrangement that kept working families alive, community support born from mutual need and genuine care. Mama, why do you cry when you think we're sleeping? Carmen, age 8. Rosa's world shattered the week her 2010 Honda Civic broke down. The transmission gave out on a Tuesday morning, leaving her stranded and facing a $650 repair bill she couldn't afford. She borrowed the money from a payday loan company, knowing the interest would destroy her budget, but she needed that car to get to work, to survive. That single repair created a domino effect. The loan payment meant she couldn't make full rent. The partial rent payment triggered late fees. The late fees snowballed into the eviction notice that now sat on her kitchen table like a death sentence. Rosa wasn't asking for luxury. She wasn't asking for handouts. She was a fighter who'd built a life from nothing, who'd earned her education while raising children, who showed up every single day to care for other people's families while barely keeping her own together. But fighting becomes impossible when the system itself is designed to keep you down. When full-time work doesn't pay living wages. When one car repair can destroy months of careful budgeting. When being a single mother means carrying twice the responsibility on half the resources. I can't let my babies end up homeless, she whispered to herself that night, the eviction notice trembling in her hands. These weren't just words, they were a mother's sacred promise. A line she would never cross. A boundary that defined everything she was willing to sacrifice. Comment below if you've ever felt like Rosa, fighting against impossible odds, working harder than anyone should have to, just to keep your family safe. Because her story is about to prove that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. 60 miles away from Rosa's desperate moment, Theodore Hartwell III sat in his mahogany-paneled study on the 42nd floor of a Chicago high-rise. The city stretched below him like a constellation of possibilities, each light representing lives he'd never touch, struggles he'd never understand. At 58, Theo had built his fortune through calculated decisions and strategic thinking. His corner office overlooked Lake Michigan, and his business empire had made him comfortable beyond most people's imagination. Yet tonight, surrounded by quarterly reports and market analyses, he felt the familiar weight of isolation that success often brings. Theo's phone rarely held personal messages anymore. Most communications came through assistants, filtered through layers of corporate protocol. His personal number was guarded like state secrets, known only to a select few business associates and the handful of family members who still bothered to maintain contact. This man had received thousands of requests for money over the years, charity organizations with polished presentations, investment opportunities from well-connected entrepreneurs, carefully crafted appeals from professional fundraisers who knew exactly which emotional buttons to press. His standard response had become automatic, a polite decline, sometimes accompanied by a modest donation to established charities, always maintaining professional distance. But when Rosa's message lit up his phone at 11:47 p.m., something fundamental shifted. The text wasn't addressed to Mr. Hartwell or Dear Philanthropist. There was no company letterhead, no tax deduction mention, no strategic networking attempt. Just raw human desperation bleeding through a cracked phone screen. Maria, I don't know what else to do. Theo read the message 3 times. Then 4. Something about Rosa's words cut through decades of careful emotional armor he'd constructed around his wealth. This wasn't a calculated appeal. It was a mother's midnight confession to her sister, accidentally delivered to a stranger's phone. For 30 minutes, Theo stared at that message. His business instincts screamed warnings about scams, about professional beggars who'd perfected the art of appearing authentic. He'd learned to recognize manipulation, to spot the carefully crafted sob stories designed to separate wealthy people from their money. But something about Rosa's message stopped him cold. Maybe it was the specific details, the $800 amount, The broken car, the children's ages. Maybe it was the raw vulnerability in her words, the way she apologized for asking her own sister for help. Or maybe it was the timestamp, 11:47 p.m., when desperation reaches its deepest point and pretense becomes impossible. This message felt different, authentic, real. Theo had spent decades insulating himself from exactly this kind of human need. Success had taught him to view requests for help with suspicion, to maintain boundaries that protected his resources and his peace of mind. Yet here was a message that had bypassed every filter, every defense mechanism, every carefully constructed wall between his world and the struggles of ordinary people. What he would discover about Rosa's situation would change everything he believed about success and struggle. But first he had to make a choice that would define who he really was when nobody was watching. The clock on his desk showed 12:17 a.m. Rosa's phone was dead. She had no idea her desperate plea had reached someone who could actually help. The question was, would he? Rosa's fingers moved across the damaged screen, each letter a struggle against the spider web of cracks that had spread since Diego dropped her phone 3 weeks ago. The battery icon flashed red 3%, then 2%. Time was running out, just like everything else in her life. She squinted at the contact list, searching for Maria Phoenix. The crack running through the middle of her screen made the numbers blur together. Her sister's number ended in 4738, she was certain. Or was it 4783? The eviction notice had rattled her more than she wanted to admit, and now even simple tasks felt overwhelming. Rosa pressed what she thought was the right number and began typing her desperate plea. Each word felt like pulling pieces of her soul through her fingertips. Maria, I don't know what else to do. They're going to evict us next week, and I can't let my babies end up homeless. She hit send just as her phone died completely. What Rosa didn't know was that her trembling finger had transposed 2 digits. Instead of reaching her sister in Phoenix, her message had traveled to a phone in Chicago, to a man whose name she'd never heard, whose world she couldn't fathom. Theodore Hartwell stared at the unexpected message on his locked phone screen. The preview showed enough to capture his attention. Maria, I don't know what else to do. They're going to evict us next week. Against every instinct he'd developed over decades of wealth management, Theo opened the message and read Rosa's complete confession. Her fear bled through every word. Her love for her children radiated from phrases like my babies and I've tried everything. This wasn't a polished fundraising appeal. This was a mother's midnight prayer to her sister. 30 minutes passed. Theo walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, studying the city lights below. How many Rosa Delgados were out there right now, typing desperate messages on broken phones, working impossible hours just to survive another month? Finally, he composed a response. I think you've reached the wrong number, but I couldn't help noticing you're in a difficult situation. Are you and your children safe tonight? The message sat unsent for another 10 minutes while Theo wrestled with his decision. Then he pressed send. Rosa didn't see Theo's response until the next morning when she plugged her phone into the charger before her 6 a.m. shift. The notification confused her. She expected comfort from Maria, not questions from an unknown number with a Chicago area code. She typed back carefully, I'm sorry, I was trying to reach my sister. Thank you for asking, though. We're safe for now, just scared about next week. I don't know why I'm telling a stranger this, but sometimes kindness from unexpected places means everything. Theo read her response during his coffee break between board meetings. Something about Rosa's honesty, her willingness to share vulnerability with a complete stranger, cracked open something he'd kept locked away for years. What's your situation? He typed back. Maybe there's something I can do to help. Rosa stared at her phone during her lunch break, sitting in her car in the hospital parking lot. A stranger was offering help, In her experience, strangers who offered help usually wanted something in return. Yet this person's messages felt different, genuine concern without ulterior motives. "I work as a nursing assistant," she responded. "2 kids, single mom. My car broke down and the repair cost put me behind on rent. Now they want $800 in 5 days or we're out. I've never asked strangers for help before, but I'm desperate enough to try anything." The conversation continued over the next several hours, each exchange revealing more about both their lives. Rosa shared details about her work schedule, her children's ages, her determination to provide stability despite impossible circumstances. Theo found himself drawn into her story, asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than polite charity. What would you do if a stranger asked you for $500? Would you ignore the message, send a polite decline, or take the risk of getting involved in someone else's crisis? For Theo, this moment would define not just his response to Rosa, but his understanding of responsibility, privilege, and what it really means to make a difference in someone's life. Pause and tell us, would you have responded to Rosa's text? Let us know in the comments, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about helping others. Theo's business instincts kicked into overdrive. For 3 decades he'd built his empire by analyzing problems methodically, gathering data before making decisions, understanding systems before attempting to change them. Rosa's situation wasn't just about $800, it represented something larger, more complex than a simple financial emergency. He cancelled his afternoon meetings and dove into research with the same intensity he'd once applied to mining surveys and market analysis. His first search was simple: single mother poverty statistics, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The numbers that appeared on his screen were staggering. Research notes: Theo's laptop screen, Milwaukee County single mother demographics. 45% poverty rate among single mothers. Average housing costs, 60% of income. Median income, $28,000 annually. Chilled poverty rate, 38.4%. Eviction rate, 16.2 per 100 households. Theo leaned back in his chair, processing the data. Rosa wasn't an anomaly, she was representative of nearly half the single mothers in her city. Working full-time and still unable to afford basic necessities wasn't a personal failure. It was a systemic reality affecting tens of thousands of families. His next search focused on Rosa's profession. Certified nursing assistant wages, Milwaukee benefits. The results painted a clearer picture of her daily struggle. CNAs in Milwaukee earned between $14 to $18 per hour, often without health insurance, working physically demanding jobs that required genuine compassion and skill. These were the people caring for society's most vulnerable members, while barely able to care for their own families. But Theo wanted to know more about Rosa specifically. Through careful questioning during their text exchanges over the next 2 days, he learned details that transformed his understanding of her character and circumstances. Rosa had earned her CNA certification at Milwaukee Area Technical College while 7 months pregnant with Carmen. She'd attended night classes after working day shifts at a department store, studying between contractions during her final semester. Her clinical rotations began just 6 weeks after Carmen's birth, with Mrs. Patterson watching the newborn while Rosa learned to care for elderly patients with dementia and physical disabilities. Her work record was flawless. 7 years at Milwaukee General Care Facility with perfect attendance, except for 3 days when Diego had pneumonia and couldn't stay with Mrs. Patterson. Her supervisor evaluations consistently rated her as exceptional in patient care, noting her ability to connect with difficult patients and comfort families during their most challenging moments. The story of her marriage's collapse revealed systemic issues beyond Rosa's control. Miguel had struggled with gambling addiction, hiding his problem until their savings account was empty and credit cards maxed out. The night he abandoned his family, he'd taken their emergency fund to cover gambling debts, leaving Rosa with 2 small children and financial obligations she never knew existed. Research notes continued. Background check results: Rosa Delgado. Employment, 7 years, Milwaukee General Care. Performance ratings, consistently excellent. Criminal record, none. Credit issues, all related to ex-husband's undisclosed debts. Community involvement, volunteers at children's school events. Theo discovered that Rosa's situation reflected broader economic realities affecting working families across America. The cost of childcare in Milwaukee averaged $12,000 annually per child, nearly half her gross income. Healthcare premiums consumed another 15% of her paycheck, leaving virtually nothing for emergencies or savings. Her broken Honda Civic represented more than transportation. It was her lifeline to economic survival. Without reliable transportation, she couldn't maintain the employment that barely kept her family housed and fed. The $650 repair cost had triggered a domino effect of financial catastrophe that no amount of budgeting or determination could prevent. What struck Theo most powerfully was Rosa's resilience in the face of impossible circumstances. She hadn't just survived, she'd excelled. Her patients loved her. Her children were thriving academically despite their unstable housing situation. She'd built a life of dignity and purpose while carrying burdens that would crush most people. The research revealed uncomfortable truths about American economic systems that Theo had never confronted directly. Rosa worked in an essential profession, providing care that society desperately needed, yet earned wages insufficient to secure her own family's basic needs. She represented millions of Americans caught in the gap between full-time employment and livable income. Her story challenged every assumption Theo had maintained about poverty, personal responsibility, and the relationship between hard work and financial security. Rosa wasn't lazy, uneducated, or irresponsible. She was a skilled professional, devoted mother and community member whose circumstances resulted from policy choices and economic structures rather than personal failures. But what Theo discovered next would shatter every assumption he had about poverty, success, and the hidden potential that exists when people are given genuine opportunities to thrive rather than merely survive. Rosa's insights about healthcare, community support, and economic policy, shared through their growing text conversations, revealed a sharp intellect and systems thinking that rivaled many of his business associates. She wasn't just asking for help, she was offering solutions. During their 4th day of text exchanges, Rosa shared something that stopped Theo cold. Instead of focusing on her immediate crisis, she began describing solutions, comprehensive, thoughtful strategies for addressing single-mother poverty that demonstrated a depth of understanding he rarely encountered in boardrooms. "The problem isn't that single mothers don't work hard enough," Rosa texted during her lunch break. "It's that the system is designed to keep us trapped. Affordable childcare would let us work full-time. Healthcare that doesn't bankrupt us when kids get sick. Housing that doesn't consume 70% of our income. Most importantly, pathways to advancement that recognize our skills and determination." Theo stared at his phone. This wasn't just survival thinking. This was policy analysis from someone who understood both the academic theories and lived realities of economic inequality. Rosa continued, "I see it every day at work. Elderly patients whose families can't afford proper care because they're stuck in the same cycle I am. CNAs who could become nurses if they had support for education. Single mothers with brilliant ideas for businesses, but no access to capital or networks." She paused, then added, "If someone with resources really wanted to help, they wouldn't just pay individual bills. They'd create systems that address root causes, subsidized housing near good schools, on-site childcare at healthcare facilities, educational programs designed around working parent schedules, mentorship networks connecting single mothers with successful professionals. Theo read her messages 3 times. Rosa wasn't just asking for charity, she was presenting a comprehensive framework for social change. Her insights combined street-level wisdom with strategic thinking that matched anything his consulting firms had produced. "Rosa," he typed back, his hands trembling slightly, "what if I told you I might be able to help implement some of these ideas?" "That would be wonderful," she responded, "but ideas without resources stay ideas. Real change requires serious investment and long-term commitment. Most people who say they want to help aren't prepared for that level of engagement." It was time for truth. Theo had spent a week learning about Rosa's character, her capabilities, her vision. Now she deserved to know who she'd been texting. "Rosa, I need to tell you something. My name is Theodore Hartwell III. I own Hartwell Industries, a mining and minerals company. Forbes estimates my net worth at $8.2 billion. The response took 27 minutes. "Are you serious?" Rosa finally texted back. "Completely serious. I've spent the last week researching everything you've told me, and I've discovered something that shocks me more than my wealth probably shocks you." "What's that?" "You're not just surviving impossible circumstances, you're thriving. Your insights about systemic poverty are more sophisticated than reports I've paid consultants millions to produce. Your vision for comprehensive solutions demonstrates leadership thinking that most executives ever develop." Theo continued typing, his words flowing with conviction he hadn't felt in years. "This isn't about charity anymore, Rosa. This is about justice. About recognizing that intelligence and capability exist everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. You've proven that given the right support, people don't just escape poverty. They become leaders who can prevent others from experiencing it." Rosa's response revealed the emotional weight she'd been carrying. "I've spent 7 years believing I was failing because I couldn't make the math work. Working 70 hours a week and still facing eviction made me question everything about my worth and capabilities. The math doesn't work because the system is broken." Theo replied, "Your failure to thrive in a rigged game doesn't reflect your abilities. It exposes the game's fundamental unfairness." What happened next would transform both their lives forever. "Rosa, what if we partnered to create the comprehensive support system you described? Not as donor and recipient, but as equals bringing different resources to solve the same problem. You bring lived experience, community credibility, and visionary thinking. I bring financial resources and business networks." Rosa stared at her phone for 15 minutes before responding. "You're talking about changing thousands of lives." "I'm talking about changing everything," Theo replied. "Starting with Milwaukee but scaling nationwide. Creating a new model that proves what's possible when we address root causes instead of just symptoms." The moment both realized they could change everything had arrived. 2 strangers connected by a wrong number were about to reshape how America approaches poverty, opportunity, and human potential. 6 months after that fateful wrong number text, Rosa stood in front of a renovated community center in Milwaukee's River West neighborhood, holding a key that represented far more than access to a building. She was about to unlock the doors to the Hartwell Delgado Family Empowerment Center, the first comprehensive support facility designed by single mothers, for single mothers. Rosa's title wasn't program recipient or beneficiary. It was executive director, and she'd earned every letter of that designation through months of intensive planning, policy development, and community engagement. Theo had provided the resources, but Rosa had designed the blueprint for transformation. The center offered what Rosa had envisioned during those late-night text exchanges: subsidized housing units connected to on-site childcare, educational programs scheduled around work shifts, healthcare services that didn't require choosing between rent and prescription medications. But the revolutionary element was Rosa's insistence on treating participants as partners rather than charity cases. "We're not here to rescue anyone," Rosa explained to the first group of 30 single mothers selected for the pilot program. "We're here to remove barriers so you can rescue yourselves and then help others do the same." Within the first year, the results exceeded every projection Theo's business analysts had created. Janet Williams, a single mother of 3 who'd been living in her car, completed her nursing degree and secured a position at Milwaukee General, the same facility where Rosa had worked double shifts. Maria Santos launched a catering business that now employs 6 other program participants. Lisa Chen earned her teaching certification and became the center's education coordinator. But the transformation went deeper than employment statistics. Children who'd struggled academically while dealing with housing instability began excelling when their basic needs were secure. Carmen, Rosa's 8-year-old daughter, started a peer tutoring program for younger children at the center. 5-year-old Diego, who'd once asked why Mummy cried at night, now proudly tells visitors that his mother helps families become strong. The Milwaukee program's success attracted attention from mayors, social service agencies, and policy researchers across the country. Unlike traditional anti-poverty initiatives that focused on temporary assistance, Rosa's model emphasized permanent transformation through comprehensive support and participant leadership. By the second year, expansion requests poured in from cities nationwide. Detroit wanted to adapt the model for auto industry families. Phoenix sought to address rural single-mother poverty. Chicago proposed scaling the program for their South Side communities. Rosa found herself testifying before congressional committees, consulting with federal agencies, and presenting at academic conferences. The nursing assistant who'd once feared homelessness was now shaping national conversations about poverty, opportunity, and human potential. The expansion process revealed Rosa's extraordinary leadership capabilities. She insisted that each new location be directed by someone from the target community. Former participants who understood both the challenges and possibilities firsthand. Authentic leadership matters, she explained to Theo during one of their weekly strategy meetings. People need to see themselves in the person offering hope. Theo watched Rosa's transformation with amazement and deep respect. His wealth had purchased buildings, equipment, and initial operating funds, but Rosa's vision and leadership had created sustainable change. She'd evolved from desperate single mother to national policy influencer without losing the compassion and authenticity that made her effective. The program's success began influencing other wealthy individuals to reconsider their philanthropic approaches. Tech billionaire Amanda Chen visited the Milwaukee Center and subsequently restructured her foundation to emphasize participant leadership over traditional charity models. Real estate mogul Robert Martinez partnered with Rosa to create affordable housing developments integrated with comprehensive family services. Rosa changed how I understand the relationship between wealth and responsibility, Theo told a gathering of philanthropists at a private conference in Aspen. I thought success meant having resources to help others. She taught me that real success means creating systems where help becomes unnecessary. The transformation extended beyond program participants to policy changes at state and federal levels. Rosa's testimony about childcare accessibility influenced legislation expanding funding for workplace childcare programs. Her insights about healthcare costs for working families contributed to insurance policy reforms. Her research on housing stability's impact on children's education shaped new approaches to school funding in economically challenged communities. But perhaps the most profound transformation occurred within Rosa's own family. Carmen, now 10, announced her intention to become a doctor who creates free clinics in underserved communities. Diego, 7 years old, confidently discusses his plans to help families like Mama does. Both children understand that their mother's work extends far beyond their household. She's changing how America thinks about poverty, opportunity, and human dignity. Rosa's journey from desperate midnight text to national changemaker proved that potential exists everywhere, waiting for the right combination of opportunity and support to flourish. Her partnership with Theo demonstrated that meaningful social change requires both resources and authentic leadership from those directly affected by the problems being addressed. The wrong number that connected a struggling single mother with a billionaire had become a right connection that transformed thousands of lives and inspired a new model for addressing systemic inequality across America. What can Rosa and Theo's extraordinary story teach us about life, compassion, and the power of human connection? First, sometimes our biggest mistakes lead to our greatest miracles. Rosa's transposed digits, a simple error born from exhaustion and a cracked phone screen, connected her with the one person who could transform not just her life, but thousands of others. The moment she thought was her lowest point became the catalyst for extraordinary change. How many times do we beat ourselves up over small mistakes, never realizing they might be redirecting us towards something beautiful? Second, one moment of compassion can literally change the world. Theo could have deleted that message, dismissed it as a scam, or sent a polite wrong number reply. Instead, he chose curiosity over caution, empathy over self-protection. That single choice to respond with "Are you and your children safe tonight?" rippled outward to create a national movement affecting thousands of families. Your next act of kindness might be someone's turning point. Third, real problems demand real solutions, not just temporary fixes. Rosa's crisis wasn't solved by a $500 donation. It was transformed by addressing the systemic issues that created her desperation. Charity treats symptoms, justice addresses root causes. True compassion doesn't just help people survive their circumstances, it changes the circumstances themselves. Fourth, everyone deserves dignity, not just survival. Rosa wasn't asking for a handout, she was working 70 hours a week in an essential profession. She didn't need rescue. She needed recognition of her worth and removal of artificial barriers to her success. The most powerful transformations happen when we see people's potential rather than just their problems. Today, 5 years after that desperate midnight text, Rosa and Theo continue their partnership as equals. The Hartwell-Delgado family empowerment model now operates in 47 cities across America. Over 12,000 single mothers have completed the program, with 89% achieving permanent financial stability and 34% launching their own businesses or advancing to leadership positions in their fields. Rosa recently completed her master's degree in public policy from Northwestern University, something she never imagined possible during those sleepless nights when eviction notices haunted her kitchen table. She speaks at universities, advises government agencies, and serves on corporate boards, always maintaining the authentic voice that made her effective from the beginning. Theo restructured his entire business philosophy around stakeholder capitalism, ensuring Hartwell Industries employees receive living wages, comprehensive health care, and educational opportunities. His approach influenced dozens of other executives to reconsider their responsibility to workers and communities. But the most beautiful outcome isn't measured in statistics or program expansions. It's in the moment when a current program participant looks at Rosa and sees possibility instead of limitation. When a single mother realizes that her struggle isn't a personal failure, but a systemic challenge that can be overcome with the right support and partnership. Rosa and Theo's story proves that transformation is possible when resources meet authentic leadership, when privilege recognizes responsibility, and when two people choose connection over indifference. Their wrong number became humanity's right connection. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell. These are the stories that matter, the ones that remind us how much good is possible when we choose compassion over convenience, partnership over pity, and justice over charity. Rosa never did reach her sister Maria that night. Her desperate plea for $500 to prevent eviction traveled instead to a Chicago penthouse, where a billionaire sat surrounded by reports about quarterly profits and market projections. But sometimes the universe has different plans for our messages and our lives. Maria would have been compassionate. She might have scraped together a few $100, enough to buy Rosa another month of uncertainty, another cycle of working impossible hours just to stay barely afloat. Maria would have helped her sister survive. But Rosa's message reached someone who could do something Maria never could. Someone with the resources to address not just Rosa's crisis, but the systemic issues that created it. Someone who needed Rosa's wisdom and authenticity as much as she needed his financial power. The text that was meant for family found a different kind of family, a partnership that would transform thousands of lives and challenge America's understanding of poverty, potential, and human dignity. 5 years later, when Rosa speaks to new program participants, she often holds up her old phone with its spider web of cracks across the screen. "This broken phone changed my life," she tells them, not because it worked perfectly, but because it failed in exactly the right way. That cracked screen led to a transposed digit. The transposed digit led to an unexpected connection. The unexpected connection led to authentic conversation. The authentic conversation led to mutual respect. The mutual respect led to equal partnership. The equal partnership led to a movement that proves what's possible when resources meet wisdom, when privilege recognizes responsibility, and when two strangers choose connection over indifference. Sometimes the universe conspires to connect exactly the right people at exactly the right moment. A desperate mother's typo became a lifeline for thousands of families who now have safe housing, meaningful work, and hope for their children's futures. And it all started with a cracked phone screen and a moment of human compassion. Rosa's children, Carmen and Diego, now teenagers with college plans and career dreams, understand their mother's journey from desperation to leadership. They've learned that strength isn't measured by how much you can carry alone, but by how many others you can lift up when you're given the chance. Theo continues to marvel at how a single text message transformed his understanding of wealth, responsibility, and what it means to make a meaningful difference. He often says Rosa taught him the difference between having money and having purpose. Their story reminds us that our most desperate moments might be doorways to our greatest transformations, that the help we need might come from the most unexpected sources, and that when we respond to others' vulnerability with genuine compassion, we don't just change their lives, we discover who we're truly meant to become. What wrong number moment changed your life? Share your story below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more extraordinary true stories that prove miracles are still happening all around us.